Welcome back. Now, details have emerged of major learning gaps that candidates suffered during the shutdown of schools occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic. This coming just 2 months to the start of KCPE. In fact, the assessment shows that majority of Class 8 learners performed below average in an assessment given in October 2020, failing to attain the minimum benchmark of 50% in most of these subjects assessed. So let's speak now to Mutheu Kasanga. She is the chairperson of the Kenya Private Schools Association. Mutheu, many thanks for joining us here on News Desk. It is just a few weeks there to the start of KCPE. What impact does this assessment have on the assessment of learners?
I need to put a few reminders here. This assessment was done last year. It was done immediately the candidate classes opened. So it was done by grade 4 students and standard 8 students. And it was an assessment that was meant to check what are the learning losses our kids have after a very long closure. Let us remember that this closure affected 91.3% of the world's school-going population. 1.57 billion children were not in school worldwide. So it's not a Kenyan thing alone. Learning losses at this particular time are not that. And then what are these learning losses we are discussing here? Education is a continuum. And what research has shown is that without practice, facts and procedural skills, mathematics and that sort of thing, are the most susceptible to losses with prolonged stoppage of learning. The other effect that I think has come up in the news item just before that was the issue that, for instance, some children have completely dropped out of school. These learning losses impact a country in very different ways. So, for instance, what this report shows that at the time when that assessment was done, which was October, end of October, early November, if KCPE had been at that time, that is what would have happened. We have been in school for a full term, 10 weeks, and now we are in another term. Those children are not the same now. They are not where they were last year. They have recovered significantly because we have got back into the practice and reminded them of the facts. So this report is painting a picture of kids will fail massively in KCPE. This is not correct. Kids have been learning. We have managed, because it gave us a benchmark of where to start. Please remember that this was an in-school assessment. It wasn't marked externally, it was marked within schools. So we teachers have had this data from the time this assessment was done. We have acted upon it. So it is not now that we are getting results. No, this was an assessment done in school, marked in school, then the marks forwarded to NEC. So it was not a national examination, it was an assessment. And that is why at the time it was being done, you didn't hear the way when Kenyans are doing exams, you didn't hear a huge fuss about it. You didn't hear a huge fuss about it. All you heard was that there was a national assessment, kwisha maneno. And then now we got the results because we marked, and then we forwarded the grades to NEC. What you have now is a collection, like an outcome. When the marks are aggregated, what does the picture paint of a country? We already know what each school has to do, and they have been doing it since then.
Registered higher mean scores than their counterparts in schools located in rural areas in pretty much all subject areas. So that being said, how does this assessment resonate with teachers and education stakeholders with a view of informing the areas of targeted intervention?
What, again, I emphasize, it showed what the gaps were. And it showed that difference between urban kids and rural kids has something to do with access to information. Kids in urban areas were more likely to have access to internet. Kids in urban areas were more likely to have regular other engagements that allowed them to learn. They were more likely to have a TV in the home. They were more likely to have online lessons or access to the free content that the private sector and other publishers so readily provided. that is what that result is showing. It is not showing that if we do KCPE today, this is the outcome. So we need to really be clear about the timelines for this assessment so that we can draw the right conclusions.
Right, but have there been any interventions put in place to address the disparities, considering that this same study also establishing that pupils in private schools registered higher mean scores than their counterparts in public schools? And let's face it, with COVID-19, those disparities were glaring even in national media.
That said, the private schools anyways register better KCPE outcomes, COVID or no COVID. So that is nothing new to us in the private sector. KCPE results year in, year out do show that private schools do better on the whole than public schools. Here we are discussing economical and our societal differences. Again, they are being laid bare. Just the same way that during COVID, they were laid bare again. Those who have were able to go online, while those who couldn't go online. The government did try and avail other methods of accessing knowledge, and I feel that perhaps some sectors, some stakeholders did not do enough to encourage kids to take on these issues. Like, for instance, radio. There were news articles that kept arguing that there were not enough kids with access to radio, yet the census shows a different figure, that homes do have radios. With that negative perception of not having, we saw kids, especially secondary school kids, who are not motivated by the communities and the society that we live in to actually access the free content that was available. And the older kids, especially the standard 8 kids, were affected by these narratives that were even emanating from homes. So as going forward, we do have quite a lot in available in our country. We have a lot of free content that is disseminated by government. What we need is buy-in from all the stakeholders so that we support causes to reduce this gap that has been and is there. That private-public gap is not new to COVID. It has been there. KCPE results year in, year out show that kids in private schools do better than kids in public school. Right. This is the way our education system unfortunately is. And the one thing is that it shows that no matter where the private school is, be it in Kibera, be it in Kayole, be it where, it seems to be doing better than a public school in that same locality. So it's not necessarily about wealth. It is a different narrative that we all need to look at and agree that perhaps the working ethos of some of our public school needs to be addressed. Another thing, not just the fact that private, public. The one thing that is clear, and this is study in, study out, is that perhaps the teachers in private schools are more committed to their jobs than perhaps the teachers in public schools. Maybe it could be the size of the classes in public schools. All those are factors that help make a teacher effective or not effective. These are the things that need looking at in the long term. Right. To bridge that gap between the public and the private. And
of course, with this report, still standing and the national examinations set in just a few weeks, what are your expectations of that outcome?
Our expectations as a whole is that we are expecting a slightly depressed KCPE. Why? Because the whole country has suffered. And while there was access to learning, that access was not equally accessible to all children, be they public or private. The quality of that access also matters. There were schools that did pretty robust online learning that engaged their students fully, while others couldn't manage that because of technology issues. So we are expecting as a whole, and this is where the government policy to go back to where we stopped. So we started back in second term. And therefore, we've all had a chance to review first term again so that to minimize the learning losses. That said, I expect personally a slightly depressed KCPE curve compared to the previous years. That in itself should not affect transition to schools. It would mean that the admission process is also adjusted to cater for that, because the intelligence of the children is not compromised by this. If all the children, if say we have fewer top line marks, say 420 and above, it doesn't mean that Alliance will get fewer kids. It means that we have to adjust how we allocate the schools. So I'm not expecting that the children will suffer from this at all. The schools are ours, they are Kenyan schools. These are our Kenyan children. I expect all of us to do the best for our children with what we have. After all, KCPE is just that. It's a placement exam. It is not a measure of intelligence. We have seen kids succeed despite not succeeding in KCPE. It is just a placement exam. And I look forward to CBC, where some of these issues are dealt with in a different way rather than exposing children to an exam that seems to declare them intelligent or not.
All right. Many thanks for your time. That is Mutheu Kasanga. She is the chairperson of the Kenya Private Schools Association, weighing in on the alleged disparities in the just coming KCPE examinations. And for matters education, Kakamega Governor and former Council of Governors Chairman Wycliffe Oparanya has urged medics in the county to embrace dialogue, even as the health